Hey, what's going on? YST here. Welcome back to another raid video. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 void epic champions when you talk about the clan boss in this game. And if you stay tuned to the end of the video, I'll also be throwing in an extra 5 bonus champions that didn't quite make the top 10 list, but also have a lot of utility when you talk about the clan boss. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright guys, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go into my favorite epic when it comes to void champions in this game. It's going to be Godseeker Aneri. You may have guessed it. Smiley, if you're watching, there you go, I've showed her again. But yeah, Godseeker Aneri, I cannot express how good this champion is in this game, not just for the clan boss. When you talk about arena, faction wars, the dungeon progression, even in places in the Doom Tower, Godseeker Aneri is absolutely insane. So let's get into her kit. So attacks one enemy and heals the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of their max HP. Cannot heal this champion and based on defense, and she is a defense based champion. That's a really solid A1 for some heals, and you can kind of book it out and get some extra heals and damage out on the A1. Then on the A2, attacks all enemies and heals all allies by 15% of their max HP, and you can book it out to an extra heal, and then decreases the duration of all buffs on enemies by 1 turn and increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn. So very similar to a Sana Survivor with extending those buffs and decreasing the enemy debuffs. It's really good in a lot of compositions, so you can extend your increased defense, your block debuffs, and all the buffs that you really like to have on your champions. For an extra turn, keep your affinity friendly and keep your run going as long as possible. And then on the A3, revives a dead ally with 50% HP and then fills their turn meters by 50% and resets the cooldowns of all their skills. And that is on a 4-turn cooldown once booked. It's a really nice ability, especially when you're progressing in the clan boss, because you might get hit with a bad crit and she can revive that champion and make sure that your run can go on for an extra million or 2 million depending on your composition. And then in the passive, another revive ability, but first of all, as a passive effect, increases the amount of healing allies receive by 10%, and as the active effect, if an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, preempts that hit and instantly places a revive on death buff on them for 1 turn before the damage is taken, and that is also on a 4-turn cooldown with that passive. Overall guys, you got the heal on the A1, you got the A2 with the AoE heal and you extend the buffs on your team. We've got revives on the A3 and then an extra revive in the passive as well. And if you think that she is just a heal or just a support champion, you're very wrong, because this champion can absolutely smack and deal a lot of damage to the clan boss. So overall, my personal favorite. And just bear in mind guys, this is not a top 10 list of this is the best and this is the worst. It's all situational depending to your clan boss team, but I've just had to showcase Godseeker first because she is my personal favorite. Okay, so next up, whilst we're in this faction, I'm gonna head into Lightsworn. You may have this champion, you may not, but I think if you're progressing in this game and you pulled him, he is an absolute game changer with his kit. So let's get into it. So on the A1, attacks one enemy 3 times, which is really nice for Giant Slayer procs and increasing your damage, and decreases the target's turn meter by 10%. This does not apply to the clan boss because you cannot decrease the turn meter, but the triple hit A1 is really nice, very similar to a Razen Scarhide. And then on the A2, attacks one enemy and places a 50% decreased attack debuff and a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Once again, decreased speed does not apply to the clan boss, but decreased attack on the A2 on a 3-turn cooldown. Not the best in the world, but is also not the worst, especially if you're running double decreased attack to keep it up consistently. And then on the A3, places a 60% increased defense buff and a revive on death buff on all allies for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. And I think overall with the triple hit A1, the decreased attack on the A2, and the increased defense and revive on death on the A3, I really do believe that Lightsworn deserves to be in the top 10 as a progression champion. I'd say mainly for maybe Brutal and Nightmare, not so much Ultra Nightmare, but it could kind of push you to your first ever 4 key if that's what you're trying to push for. So let's get into the next champion. Alright, so we're going to head straight into the Bannerlords and we're going to go into Warcaster. You may be very familiar with the Rush Guard composition using Warcaster, where you put the block damage up with Rush Guard and Warcaster takes up that extra turn. So when you talk about Unkillable teams, he is one of the pioneers in the epic category to help build a team, especially with a Rush Guard. So let's get into his kit. On the A1, attacks one enemy and has a 40% chance, extra chance once booked, of stealing 2 random buffs from the target. Not too bad when you talk about Affinity Clan Boss, but not the best A1. Then on the A2, attacks all enemies and has a 50% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. So you can get rid of increased attack and stuff on Affinity Clan Boss, but if you're running an Unkillable team, you're not going to need that much anyway. And then on the A3, which is what we use Warcaster for and why he's on the list, places a block damage buff on all allies for 1 turn on a 4-turn cooldown. This is very important, especially when running that rush guard composition. So he's very situational, he's not an all-around amazing champion, but he's there and he does what he does with his one-trick pony kit. And then under aura we got increased void ally crit rate in all battles by 23%, which is pretty nice if you're running multiple void champions. So let's get into the next one. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room. Maneater, the most elusive champion. I still only have one on my account, but if you have two, you're probably using them by now and you don't need this video to tell you how much this champion is amazing. So let's get into it. Attacks one enemy, places a 50% decreased attack debuff on all enemies if this attack is critical. Really nice for decreased attack. You could possibly use this in the faction wars, but of course if you're using a Maneater, you probably have a budget Unkillable team or a double Maneater team, so you're not really going to need that much. And then on the A2, attacks one enemy and fully depletes the target's turn meter and fills this champion's turn meter equal to the amount the target loses. I know we're only talking about the clan boss, but in the Ogre and Tribe faction wars, this is one of the main skills that helped me freestyle the final boss stage. So on this A2, when it comes to turn meter manipulation, very solid by the way. And then on the A3, with the Ancient Blood skill, this champion receives damage, then places an Unkillable buff and a block debuff buff on all allies for 2 turns, and damage received is equal to 5% max HP for each alive ally, and that is on a 5-turn cooldown. This is what makes those crazy teams in the clan boss that you see, double man-eaters, get you to 50 turns without a problem. You can run him with a Painkeeper, you can run him with Mashald, lots of compositions that use man-eater, and he's definitely a very viable champion, and not many can use the Unkillable when it comes to the clan boss. So definitely man-eater, Warcaster, Rush Guard, they are the standouts when it comes to those compositions. And then on the aura, increases ally HP in dungeons by 33%, which is pretty nice if you're in your progression stage and you want to use this aura. So let's get into the next champion. Okay, so the next champion on this list is going to be Whisper. You may not have expected it, but she's actually a really solid champion, especially in Unkillable teams and 2-to-1 ratio teams, or if you're just progressing in the clan boss and you don't have a weaken. So let's get into her kit. So attacks one enemy and has a 50% chance, 75% once booked, of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Really nice A1. Weaken is one of the most important debuffs when it comes to the clan boss to increase your Giant Slayer and War Master procs. And then on the A2, attacks one enemy and places a 50% increased attack buff and a 30% increased crit rate buff on this champion for 2 turns before attacking if the target has higher max HP than this champion. Will ignore defense if the target is under a weakened debuff. So this coincides with that A1 because of course she is doing weaken with the A1. And then on the A3, attacks one enemy 2 times and grants an extra turn if the target is under a decreased defense and weakened debuffs. So if you have decreased defense from another champion, let's say, you're going to make full use of that extra turn, leading to extra damage. And it's on a 4-turn cooldown, which isn't the worst, but a 3-turn cooldown is of course what we all want to see. And then on the passive, has a 10% chance of granting an extra turn whenever this champion lands a critical hit. So get this champion to 100% crit rate, you're going to make full use of this 10% chance of RNG proccing, and then increases damage inflicted on bosses by 20%. The clan boss is a boss, it's in his name, so 20% extra damage with this passive. Really nice to have, I would say, especially in Unkillable teams. So Whisper definitely makes this list for me. And then under aura, increases ally attack in dungeons by 29%. So overall, I'm a big fan of Whisper. Do you use her in your clan boss teams? Definitely let me know. So let's get into the next champion. Alright, so right next to Whisper, we're going to be heading into Golden Reaper, guys. You may be sitting there thinking, how could you include Golden Reaper in a top 10 list? I'll tell you what, not everyone is an Ultra Nightmare, guys. There's a lot of people in this game that are still hitting Brutal, still hitting Nightmare. She can help you in many ways in progressing in the clan boss, trying to reach those top chests in each difficulty. So let's get into her kit and explain why. So on the A1, attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of decreasing the cooldown of one of a random ally skill by 1 turn. This is where I said that if you've got a speed tuned team, you do not really want to mess with a random RNG cooldown, but if you're just going as fast as possible and you're just trying to get that top chest, and you don't really care about cooldowns because you haven't speed tuned it, this can actually help you quite a lot in trying to increase your damage because you can get those cooldowns around faster, like getting those poisons up again or HP burns, and it can help you in the long run depending where you are on the clan boss, guys. Then on the A2, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns and decreases the turn meter of each target by 20% if they are not under a decreased attack debuff. So this part here, you cannot decrease the turn meter of the clan boss, but a decreased attack on the A2, it's not too bad, especially if you're running another decreased attack champion and you just wanted extra support with that in case it's always falling off for you. And then on the A3, places a 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns and then boosts their turn meter by 20% on a 3-turn cooldown. So if you're still running an apothecary, you may kind of want to sub in this champion to increase your turn meter, increase your speed, get extra decreased attack on the clan boss, and make full use of cooldown reduction with the A1 if you're just RNGing your way through it. I'm not saying she's the best champion in the game, but for progression, a very solid choice. And then on the aura, increases ally accuracy and faction crips by 40, which is really nice to have some utility in other areas of the game. So let's get into the next champion. I only realized when recording this video that there's no void champions in the Undead Hordes. That's insane, right? Epic wise. Like when you talk about how many champions the Undead Hordes have, they don't have one void champion in their category. I wonder when that will come out. But yeah, let's just carry on into the video now. So next one is going to be in the demon spawn, and we're going to head into Paidma. Paidma, in my opinion, is one of the best decreased attack champions in this game overall, and let's get into a kit and explain why. So on the A1, attacks one enemy 2 times. We really like to see 2 times when placing decreased attack, and if this attack is critical, has a 100% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Not just good for the clan boss, it's good for absolutely anywhere. If you want to get decreased attack on the adds in some dungeons, if you want to go into the Doom Tower and stop the aggro of the enemies that's hitting really hard on your team, this is a really good ability because 100% chance, what's there not to like about that? It's on the A1, and the only requirement that you need is 100% crit rate to make this consistent, guys. So if you talk about consistency, Paidma is really good, and with her being a void champion, you can take it into any affinity and you don't really have to worry about getting weak hits. So on the A2, attacks all enemies and has a 35% chance, an extra chance once booked, of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Once again, AoE, and it hits pretty hard in the faction wars. That's the only place where I've used it. So once again, really solid, and decreased accuracy is a very powerful debuff. And then on the A3, attacks one enemy, removes all buffs from the target and places them on this champion. So let's just say in affinity, the clan boss has increased attack up. She can kind of remove that, put it on herself, and you're also taking off that buff from the clan boss to make sure you don't take much of a hit. So overall, really nice champion, but the main thing is that decreased attack on the A1. So let's follow on into the next champion. Okay, so at number 7, I think it's number 7, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's going to be Ragnar. Ragnar was a really good addition to the game. I'm not sure how many of you guys use him. He has a lot of utility, believe me. Attacks one enemy and has a 50% chance, 60% once booked, of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Leech, as I've said in my previous video, is one of the most powerful debuffs when it comes to the clan boss when you talk about keeping your team alive. If you don't have the best lifesteal sets or you don't have the best kits in general, Leech is a really good way to heal your champions and make sure that you can last longer in the clan boss run. And then on the A2, sacrifices HP equal to 15% of this champion's max HP and then fills this champion's turn meter by 75%. Places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of their max HP for 3 turns, and this shield buff cannot be removed. The HP sacrifice will happen even if it kills this champion and would ignore shield and block damage buffs. So with skill prioritization, you can completely take this out if you don't want to use it, but if you want to use it, it's very RNG and very situational, and as it says in the kit, if this skill will kill him, it actually will, so just bear that in mind. And on the A3, places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns, then attacks one enemy. Has a 75% chance, 100% once booked, of placing a 25% weaken debuff on the target for 2 turns. So increased attack and weaken so far, and also has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on the target for 2 turns before attacking. So we've got increased attack, we've got weaken, and we've got decreased defense on a 4-turn cooldown, all in one skill. That is 3 really powerful things when it comes to the clan boss, so don't overlook this skill and completely lock this one out if it is killing him in your clan boss team. So far the leech, we've got the increased attack, weaken, decreased defense, and then on the passive decreases the cooldown of this champion's Gleam of Avarice, which was the A3, by 1 turn every time this champion loses 15% HP. So that will work out really nice if you want to get more decreased defense and weaken out. And the HP loss is accumulated and tracked over multiple turns, attacks or hits, and is not affected by healing or other HP increases. So bear that in mind. And then on the aura, increases ally attack in Doom Tower battles by 35%. So let's get into the next one. Okay, so we're going to head into the Lizardman now, and we're going to talk about the new champion, Skathix. He's really good for kind of like one thing, but he still kind of needs to make this list because not a lot of void epics do what he does. So let's dive into it. So on the A1, attacks one enemy, 30% chance of placing decreased speed. This doesn't really work, but it's good for other areas of the game. And then on the A2, attacks all enemies and has a 75% chance of stealing 1 random buff from each enemy, which once again really nice for other areas of the game or affinity clan boss. And then on the A3, which is why he's made the list, is removes all debuffs from all allies and places a block debuff buff and a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. This shield buff is equal to 20% of this max HP. This is on a 4-turn cooldown, and it is a really strong ability. Block debuffs, keeping you affinity friendly, and then you've got the shield buff on all allies for 2 turns. Definitely makes the list purely because of this, and not a lot of Void champions can bring this to you in the epic category. And on the passive, places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn whenever their HP drops below 30%. So if you can make him your stun target maybe, on a 6-turn cycle, he's going to be able to get block damage up every single time, and just in general, keeping him alive, really nice to have. So mainly block debuffs, shield, and passive with this champion. So let's get into the next one. Oh, look at the state of this guy, by the way. Okay, so these next 5 champions didn't make my top 10, but it's not to say that they're not good champions in this game. And before you guys comment, what about this champion? I just want to briefly give them some honourable mentions. So the first one, along with Scaffix, is going to be Broadmoor. He's a really good champion, he's fusible, very easy to attain, and let's get into his kit. So attacks 1 enemy and has a chance of placing freeze, we don't care about that, but then on the A2, places a 30% increased crit rate and a 15% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns, and fills their turn meters by 15% on a 3-turn cooldown. I tell you what, if you're progressing in this game, this is a very strong skill, and it means you don't have to crit cap your champions. And then on the A3, revives 2 random dead allies with 25% HP and places a block damage buff on the revived allies for 1 turn, and that is on a 4-turn cooldown. So let's just say you're just trying to RNG your way through and you're in Brutal or you're in Nightmare and you keep dying like stage 20 or something and you just want to briefly hit that top chest. Reviving people is definitely one of the best ways to do that, and he does it on a 4-turn cooldown along with this increased crit rate and increased speed to help give your champions more turns if you are struggling with speed on your champions. And then on the aura, increase ally defense and faction crits by 33%, which is one of the best champions in my personal opinion in beating this faction, so definitely worth building if you have a Broadmoor. So the next one is going to be Runekeeper Dazdirk. Let's just try and find him. He's a dwarf, right? There he is. Okay, so he was going to make my top 10, but I'm going to explain why he didn't, but it's not to say why he isn't a really good champion. So on the E1, attacks 1 enemy and has a 45% chance once booked of placing that leech debuff that I always talk about for 2 turns. Really solid A1. Then on the A2, places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, and then fills the turn meters of all allies by 25% on a 3-turn cooldown. This could potentially help you reach a 2-1 ratio if you can speed tune it correctly, so I kind of do want to play with this one day and hopefully it can pay out. And then on the A3, removes all debuffs from all allies, then heals all allies by 25% of this champion's max HP, and then places a 15% continuous heal buff for 2 turns on allies that have debuff removed. You can book it up to an extra chance with the heals, and it's on a 4-turn cooldown. This is why he didn't make the list, because if this was a 3-turn, I tell you what, he would be one of my favorite champions in the game, but with him being a 4-turn, it will be pretty hard to tune with a 2-to-1 ratio team. But if you pull this champion and you're struggling to stay alive, that leech, that continuous heal, the cleansing on the debuffs, and the increased attack and turn meter fill, very solid champion on paper, and having him as a void means you could take him into any affinity you would like to. So next up on the list is going to be Ursula. There's a lot of things that's great about her kit, but I would say mainly for other areas of the game, but in the clan boss she can also have some utility, which is why I put her in this bonus 5. So on the A1, chance of decreasing the target's turn meter, that is not a good A1 for the clan boss. Then attacks all enemies and has a 100% chance once booked of placing a decreased attack debuff for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown, and places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is why she's in the list. If you don't have a viable decreased attack champion, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, which is really nice, and it brings a lot of utility with that increased attack. And then on the A3, on a 5-turn cooldown, revives all dead allies with 75% HP and then fills their turn meters by 50%. Also places a 60% increased defense buff and a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 3 turns. She places this even if she doesn't revive, but it's on a 5-turn cooldown, guys, which is why she didn't make the list for the clan boss. It's not to say she's not S tier everywhere else, but she can have some utility in you if you're just throwing a bunch of champions together, but a 5-turn cooldown, in my personal opinion, it's a bit too much for me. And then on the aura, increase ally speed in Doom Tower by 24%. So next up is going to be a champion that's not loved a lot, and it's going to be Azor, guys, but I'm not going to talk about his A1 or his A3 because they have no utility whatsoever. But it's mainly because we've got ally protection on a 4-turn cooldown and placing a shield buff on this champion equal to 40% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. So if your max HP is extremely high, that is a really big shield, and ally protection is one of the strongest things in this game when you talk about sustainability, so a very solid kit on that A2. And the final champion is going to be, okay, so Rowan. You may have been waiting for this one. Where is my Rowan? She's good in certain teams, guys. 2-to-1, unkillable, fast speeds. And the reason is her A1 is absolutely useless with that heal reduction. That is one of the debuffs we do not want on the clan boss. And then on the A2, attacks 3 times at random and each hit has a 40% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. It's nice for Giant Slayer procs with that free turn, but it's more for damage than it is for anything else. And on the A3, which is why she's on this bonus list, is attacks one enemy 4 times, and each has a 75% chance, 100% once booked, of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Each hit, guys, so there's a potential 4 turns, so 4 big versions of the poison on the clan boss every single 3 turns. That is really consistent and can add up over 50 turns if you throw it into your unkillable teams. So for this ability here, definitely makes this bonus 5. And then the final champion that I'm going to go into is going to be Battle Sage, guys, alright? And you may be thinking, how can she have utility in your team? So on the A1, attacks all enemies, says what it does on the paper, it's more about just damage, but it's mainly for this A2, so she places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, and then removes all debuffs from all allies. This buff cannot be removed on a 3-turn cooldown. That is really nice, so if you want to cleanse your stun target, or if you want to cleanse your decreased speed, for example. Very viable champion. And then on the A3, places revive on death buff on a target ally for 3 turns, and the ally will instantly revive if killed on a 4-turn cooldown, which is nice to see. And a nice increased speed in all battles by 19%. So I'd say mainly for this A2 here, she's definitely worth being in this bonus 5 because she does that cleanse on a 3-turn cooldown. So that's going to be all for the video, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. There wasn't a lot of void epics to talk about, but hopefully I did cover all of them. If I missed one of your favorites, I'm sorry, but let me know in the comment section. I'd love to find out. So I'll see you on the next one. Peace.